My name is Madison. I'm 28 years old, and until 6 weeks ago, I thought being the family peacekeeper was my purpose in life. I was wrong about a lot of things back then, but mostly I was wrong about what family actually means. You know that feeling when you realize you've been living someone else's script your entire life? When you wake up one day and see that you've been cast as the villain in a story where you were actually the victim? Yeah, that's exactly what happened to me in my childhood home in Austin, Texas, during what was supposed to be a simple family dinner. But let me tell you something. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is being pushed so far that you finally find your backbone. And boy, did I find mine. If you've ever been the family scapegoat, the one who gets blamed for everything that goes wrong, stick around. Because what I did next is going to show you exactly how to take your power back from toxic family members who think they can walk all over you forever. I grew up as the middle child in the Rodriguez family in a suburb of Austin. My older brother Tyler was the golden boy, star quarterback in high school, full ride to UT, now working some corporate job in Dallas that Dad never stops bragging about. My younger sister Chloe was the baby, the princess who could do no wrong even when she was clearly doing everything wrong. And me? I was the family therapist, the mediator, the one who was supposed to fix everyone else's problems and keep the peace. Mom would call me crying about Dad's drinking. Dad would vent to me about Mom's spending. Tyler would complain to me about his marriage issues. Chloe would expect me to bail her out of whatever drama she'd created that week. But whenever something went wrong in our family, and trust me, shit went wrong constantly, somehow it always ended up being my fault. Didn't matter if I was 3 states away when it happened. Didn't matter if I had nothing to do with it. Madison must have caused it somehow. When Tyler got his DUI sophomore year of college, Madison should have been watching out for him better. When Chloe got caught shoplifting at 17, Madison was a bad influence for moving out and not being around to guide her. When Mom and Dad's marriage started falling apart, Madison was selfish for not coming home more often to help them work things out. I'd been living in Denver for 3 years, working as a marketing manager for a tech startup, and honestly loving my life. I had my own apartment, great friends, a career that was actually going somewhere, and for the first time ever, I felt like I could breathe. I wasn't constantly walking on eggshells, waiting for the next family crisis to explode. But family has a way of pulling you back in, doesn't it? It started with a call from Mom about 6 weeks ago. "Madison, honey, we really need you to come home. There's been some complications with your grandmother's estate." Grandma Elena had passed away 3 months earlier. She was my dad's mom. And honestly, she was the only family member who ever really got me. She used to tell me I was too good for the rest of them, that I had more sense in my pinky finger than the whole family combined. I thought she was just being a sweet grandma, but turns out she was more right than I knew. "What kind of complications?" I asked, already feeling that familiar knot forming in my stomach. "Well, apparently there are some issues with the will, something about accounts that need to be sorted out. Your father is, well, he's not handling it well, and Tyler and Chloe are fighting, and I just think if you were here, you could help us figure this out as a family." The magic words, "help us figure this out." Translation: come home and fix our mess while we blame you for everything that's wrong. But it was about Grandma Elena, and I owed her that much. So I took a week off work and flew back to Austin, walking into what I thought would be a simple family meeting about inheritance paperwork. I should have known better. The house looked exactly the same as it did when I left. Mom's obsession with Southwestern decor everywhere, Dad's collection of Cowboys memorabilia taking over the den, that familiar smell of Mom's vanilla candles mixed with whatever beer Dad had been drinking. It felt like walking back in time, and not in a good way. Tyler was already there with his wife Jennifer, both of them looking stressed and whispering in the corner of the living room. Chloe was sprawled on the couch scrolling through her phone, ignoring everyone. Mom was bustling around the kitchen making way too much food, her nervous energy filling the entire house. Dad was nowhere to be seen, which usually meant he was either working late or avoiding whatever family drama was brewing. "Madison!" Mom pulled me into one of her suffocating hugs that lasted way too long. "Oh, honey, I'm so glad you're here. We really need your level head for this. Your level head. Code 4, we need someone to blame when this inevitably goes sideways. So what exactly is going on with Grandma's will?" I asked, setting my suitcase down. The room got weird and quiet really fast. Tyler and Jennifer stopped whispering. Chloe looked up from her phone. Mom started wiping down counters that were already clean. "Well," Mom said carefully, "it turns out your grandmother left some unexpected instructions." Tyler cleared his throat. She left the house to all 4 of us grandkids equally, but she also left a separate account with about $200,000. $200,000. That was a lot of money, but split 4 ways between me, Tyler, Chloe, and our cousin Marcus from Dad's brother's side. It wasn't life-changing. Still significant, but not enough to cause major family drama. Okay, I said slowly. That sounds pretty straightforward. What's the problem? That's when Chloe finally spoke up, and her voice had that bratty tone I remembered from when she was a teenager, trying to get out of trouble. The problem is that Grandma apparently told the lawyer that the money should only go to the grandchild who never asked her for anything and always took care of herself. My stomach dropped. Grandma Elena had always been proud of my independence, always praised me for making my own way, without constantly running to family for help. But surely she wouldn't have. The lawyer says that means you, Tyler said, and there was something in his voice I couldn't quite identify. All of it. The whole 200,000. I stared at them, processing what this meant. Grandma Elena had left me everything because she knew I was the only one who'd never tried to use her for money, never asked for handouts, never treated her like a personal ATM the way the others had. But that's not fair, Chloe whined. And there it was, the voice of someone who'd gotten everything handed to her for 25 years and couldn't handle the one time things didn't go her way. Actually, it's completely fair, I said quietly. It's her money, and she left it how she wanted to. That's when Dad walked in from the garage, and I could tell immediately he'd been drinking. His face was red, his movements a little too careful, and he had that mean look in his eyes that used to terrify me as a kid. Oh good, the princess is here, he said, his words slightly slurred. Come to collect your prize money? Dad, I just found out about this 5 minutes ago. Right, he said, settling heavily into his recliner. Just a coincidence that Mom's favorite gets everything. I wasn't her favorite. She loved all of us. Tyler snorted. Come on, Madison. We all know you were always her golden child. All those Sunday dinners where she'd go on and on about how proud she was of you, how independent you were. Maybe because I never asked her for rent money or car payments or bail money. I shot back, immediately regretting rising to the bait. There it is, Chloe said, sitting up straighter. There's that judgmental attitude we all know and love. I'm not being judgmental. I'm stating facts. The fact is, Dad said, pointing his beer bottle at me, that money should be split equally. That's what family does. The money is going according to Grandma's wishes. That's what family should respect. Bullshit, Tyler said, standing up. Jennifer put a hand on his arm, but he shook her off. You manipulated an old woman into leaving you money. The accusation hit me like a slap. I manipulated her? Tyler, when's the last time you visited her when you didn't need something? When's the last time any of you called her just to talk, not because you wanted money for something? That's not the point, Mom said, finally entering the conversation. The point is, family takes care of family. If you really loved us, you'd do the right thing and share that money. And there it was, the familiar guilt trip, the emotional manipulation, the way they always made everything my responsibility. If I really loved them, I'd fix their problems. If I really cared about family, I'd sacrifice my own needs for theirs. The right thing? I repeated slowly. The right thing is honoring what Grandma wanted. What Grandma wanted was for this family to stay together, Dad said, his voice getting louder. And you're tearing us apart with your greed. I looked around the room at these people, my parents, my siblings, and for the first time in my life I really saw them clearly. Saw the entitlement, the selfishness, the way they'd spent years conditioning me to believe that my job was to fix their problems and absorb their blame. Chloe was glaring at me like I'd personally ruined her life. Tyler was pacing, already calculating how he was going to pressure me into giving him money. Mom was wringing her hands, preparing to launch into a speech about family loyalty. Dad was getting drunker and meaner by the minute, and all of them, every single one of them, was looking at me like I was the villain for inheriting money that my grandmother specifically wanted me to have. You know what? I said, standing up. I think I'm going to go to my hotel and process all this. Hotel? Mom's voice went up an octave. Honey, you're staying here. Your room is exactly how you left it. No, I said firmly. I'm staying at a hotel. See? Dad pointed at me again. Too good for her own family. Just like always. I walked toward the door, grabbing my suitcase. I'll talk to you all tomorrow when everyone's had a chance to calm down. Madison, Tyler called after me, and his voice had that fake reasonable tone he used when he was trying to manipulate someone. Just think about what Grandma would really want. She'd want her family to be happy and together. I turned around one last time and looked at him. You're right, Tyler. Grandma would want her family to be happy. That's exactly why she left the money to the one person who never treated her like a bank account. The silence that followed was deafening. I walked out of that house, drove to the nearest hotel, and sat in my room staring at the ceiling, trying to process what had just happened. My entire family had basically told me I didn't deserve my inheritance and that I was selfish for not immediately promising to give it all away. But here's the thing that really got to me. Not one of them had expressed any sadness about losing Grandma Elena. Not one word about missing her, about honoring her memory, about being grateful for the time they'd had with her. It was all about the money, and how dare I be the one to get it. That's when I started to understand that maybe Grandma Elena had known exactly what she was doing. Maybe she'd seen something in my family that I'd been too close to recognize. Over the next few days, things got so much worse that I honestly didn't think they could get any worse. Boy, was I wrong about that too. But before I tell you about the absolute shit show that happened next, and how I finally found the courage to do what I should have done years ago, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Smash that like button, and make sure you're subscribed. Trust me, you're going to want to see how this story ends. Because the way I finally stood up to my toxic family is going to inspire every single person who's ever been made to feel like the problem when they were actually the solution. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. 17. At 7 a.m. on a Tuesday. I should have just turned my phone off and driven straight to the airport, but like an idiot, I thought maybe they'd had time to think about things and were calling to apologize. Because that's what normal families do when they act like assholes. They apologize. My family is not normal. The first text was from Mom at 6:23 a.m. Madison, honey, I couldn't sleep all night thinking about our conversation. Can we please talk? Seemed reasonable enough. Then I scrolled down. Tyler, 6:31 a.m. Really disappointed in you, Madison. Dad was up all night upset. Chloe, 6:45 a.m. Hope you're proud of yourself for making Mom cry. Dad, 6:52 a.m. Your grandmother would be ashamed of the person you've become. And it just got worse from there. By the time I'd read through all of them, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. These people had spent the night working themselves into a frenzy, convincing each other that I was some kind of monster for accepting an inheritance that was legally and rightfully mine. But the calls were what really did it. I played back a few of the voicemails, and Jesus Christ, you'd have thought I'd murdered someone. Mom, sobbing, Madison, please, you're tearing this family apart. Your father is so upset he can barely function. Chloe's been crying all night. Tyler had to leave work early yesterday because he was so stressed. Please, honey, just do the right thing here. Tyler, angry. I can't believe you'd be this selfish. Do you know how much Jennifer and I are struggling right now? Do you know how much we could use that money? But no, you'd rather hoard it all for yourself. Chloe, dramatic as always. I guess blood really doesn't mean anything to you. I guess having a sister who actually cares about you doesn't matter. Fine, Madison. Keep your precious money, but don't come crying to us when you realize how alone you are. And Dad, drunk and mean. You know what, Madison? Your grandmother spoiled you rotten, and now look what it's created. A selfish, greedy little bitch who'd rather watch her own family suffer than share what she doesn't even need. You're a disgrace to the Rodriguez name. That last one made me physically sick. I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, shaking, trying to understand how accepting my grandmother's final gift had turned me into the villain of my own family. I called my best friend Amy back in Denver, because I needed to hear a sane voice. Madison, what the hell? She said as soon as she picked up. Are you okay? You sound terrible. I told her everything. The inheritance, the family meeting, the texts, the voicemails, everything. Wait, Amy said when I finished. Let me get this straight. Your grandmother left you money because you were the only grandkid who never asked her for handouts, and your family is pissed at you for accepting it? Pretty much. And they want you to give it all away because... Why exactly? Because family takes care of family, apparently. Amy was quiet for a long moment. Madison, do you hear yourself right now? What do you mean? You sound like you're actually considering giving in to them. Was I? Maybe I was. That's how deep their programming ran. Even when they were being completely unreasonable and cruel. Part of me still wondered if maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was being selfish. Maybe I should just give them what they wanted to keep the peace. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe they have a point. Maybe Grandma would want me to share it. Bullshit, Amy said firmly. Madison, your grandmother specifically left instructions that the money should go to the grandchild who never asked her for anything. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was rewarding you for being independent and not treating her like an ATM. But they're my family. No, honey, family doesn't treat you like this. Family doesn't call you names and make you feel guilty for accepting a gift. Family doesn't blame you for other people's problems. That hit something deep inside me. How many times over the years had I been blamed for things that had nothing to do with me? How many times had I apologized for things that weren't my fault just to keep the peace? What should I do? I asked. What do you want to do? I thought about it for a minute. What did I want to do? Did I want to drive back to that house and hand over a check for $50,000 each just to make them stop being mad at me? Did I want to sacrifice my grandmother's final gift to appease people who clearly didn't respect me? I want to go home, I said finally. I want to go back to Denver and pretend this never happened. Then do that. But what about the family? What about keeping everyone together? Madison, Amy's voice was gentle but firm. It's not your job to keep everyone together. It never was. After I hung up with Amy, I made a decision. I was going to go to the lawyer's office, sign whatever paperwork needed to be signed, and then drive straight to the airport. I was done trying to manage other people's emotions about my inheritance. The lawyer's office was in downtown Austin, and Mr. Peterson, Grandma Elena's attorney, was this sweet older man who'd known our family for years. He seemed genuinely confused when I explained what was happening. I don't understand, he said, adjusting his glasses. Your grandmother was very specific about her intentions. She told me she wanted the money to go to you because, and I quote, Madison is the only one who's made something of herself without constantly asking for help. Did she say anything else about it? Mr. Peterson nodded. She said she was worried about enabling the others. She felt that giving them more money would just make them more dependent and entitled. She wanted to reward independence and self-sufficiency. Those words hit me like a lightning bolt. Grandma Elena hadn't just been playing favorites. She'd been trying to teach the family something about responsibility and self-reliance, and my family's reaction was proving her point perfectly. She also left you this, Mr. I, Peterson said, handing me a sealed envelope with my name written in Grandma's familiar handwriting. I opened it right there in his office, and what I read made me start crying. My dearest Madison, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're probably dealing with some unhappy family members. I'm sorry for that, but not sorry for my decision. You were always different from the others, Mija. While they were learning to take, you were learning to give. While they were learning to blame others for their problems, you were learning to solve your own. While they were learning to expect handouts, you were learning independence. This money is not just a gift, it's recognition of the person you've become. Despite growing up in a family that never appreciated your strength, use it to build the life you want, far away from people who only value you for what you can do for them. I know they'll try to make you feel guilty. I know they'll tell you I would want you to share. But I'm telling you now, I want you to keep every penny and use it to fly as high as you can. You owe them nothing. You never did. Love always. Grandma Elena P.S. If they're being particularly awful, remember that I've been watching this family for 78 years. I know exactly who they are, and I know exactly who you are. Trust my judgment. I sat in that lawyer's office and cried for 10 minutes straight. All these years, I'd thought I was imagining the dysfunction, thought I was being too sensitive, thought maybe I really was the problem. But Grandma Elena had seen it all, had watched them scapegoat me and blame me, and take advantage of my desire to keep everyone happy. And she'd left me that money not just as an inheritance, but as validation, as proof that I wasn't crazy, that their treatment of me wasn't normal or okay. When I finally composed myself, I signed all the paperwork and drove straight to the airport. I didn't go back to the house. I didn't call to say goodbye. I just left. On the plane back to Denver, I turned my phone on airplane mode and tried to process everything that had happened. For the first time in my adult life, I had a substantial amount of money in my bank account and complete freedom to use it however I wanted. But more than that, I had clarity. For the first time, I could see my family's patterns clearly, without the fog of guilt and obligation that had clouded my vision for so long. When I landed in Denver and turned my phone back on, I had 67 new messages waiting. They were about to get a lot worse. The messages that were waiting for me when I landed in Denver were unlike anything I'd ever received from my family. It was like they'd declared war. Tyler. Really mature, Madison. Just leaving without saying anything. Classic selfish behavior. Mom, I can't believe you would just disappear like this. Your father is beside himself. How could you be so cruel? Chloe. Wow. Just wow. I always knew you thought you were better than us, but this is next level. Dad, don't bother coming home for Christmas or any other holiday. Greedy people aren't welcome in this house. And that was just the beginning. Over the next 3 days, the messages kept coming. They'd apparently decided that if they couldn't guilt me into giving them money, they were going to punish me for refusing. But here's what really opened my eyes. They brought other people into it. My Aunt Linda, Dad's sister, called me on Thursday morning. Madison, honey, I heard about the situation with Elena's money. What situation? I asked carefully. Well, your father called me, and he's just so hurt. He said you're refusing to share your inheritance with the family. I took a deep breath. Aunt Linda, did Dad tell you that Grandma specifically left the money to me? That she left explicit instructions that it should go to the grandchild who never asked her for anything? There was a pause. Well, no, he didn't mention that part. Of course he didn't. Dad had called his sister to get her to pressure me, but he'd conveniently left out the part where this was Grandma Elena's specific wish. He made it sound like you were just being selfish, Aunt Linda continued. But if Elena specifically wanted you to have it, she did. I have the letter she left me explaining her reasoning. Another pause. Oh, well, that changes things, doesn't it? But Aunt Linda was just the beginning. They called my cousin Marcus, the 4th grandchild who was supposed to inherit equally from the house. They called family friends. They even called my old boss from my job in Austin 3 years ago. Each time they told the same story. Madison inherited money and is selfishly refusing to share it with her struggling family members. Each time, they left out the crucial detail that this was exactly what Grandma Elena wanted. The worst was when they called Amy. Madison, Amy said when she called me on Friday night, I just got the weirdest phone call from your sister. Oh God, what did Chloe say? She said you'd inherited $200,000 and were refusing to help your family pay for your dad's medical bills. I nearly dropped the phone. What medical bills? That's what I asked. She said your dad needs surgery and can't afford it, and you're sitting on all this money refusing to help. Amy, there are no medical bills. Dad's fine. This is the first I'm hearing about any surgery. I figured, Amy said, because when I asked what kind of surgery, she got all vague and changed the subject. But Madison, the fact that they're calling your friends and lying, I know, I said quietly. I know. But the absolute worst came on Saturday morning, when my phone rang and I saw Mom's name on the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. Madison, thank God, Mom said, and she was crying. Honey, we need to talk. Mom, I'm not giving anyone money. Grandma left it to me specifically, and I'm keeping it. No, honey, it's not about the money. Well, it is, but... Madison, your father's in the hospital. My blood ran cold. What? What happened? He had chest pains last night. We're at St. David's right now. The doctors say it was stress-induced, but they want to run more tests. Madison, he's been so upset about this family situation that it's literally making him sick. I sat down hard on my couch. Is he okay? He's stable, but honey, the stress is killing him. This whole thing with the inheritance, the fighting, you leaving without saying goodbye, it's too much for him. And there it was, the ultimate guilt trip. Dad was in the hospital, and it was my fault for not giving away my inheritance. Mom, I'm sorry Dad's in the hospital, but his stress levels aren't my responsibility. How can you say that? Mom's voice went up an octave. He's your father, and this stress is directly related to what's happening with our family. The stress is related to his reaction to me keeping money that Grandma specifically left to me. That's his choice. Madison, listen to me. If something happens to your father because of this stress, how are you going to live with yourself? I hung up the phone and immediately called the hospital. Because despite everything, if Dad was really having heart problems, I needed to know. St. David's Hospital. How can I help you? Hi, I'm calling to check on a patient. Roberto Rodriguez. He was admitted last night with chest pains. Are you family? I'm his daughter. Let me transfer you to the nurse's station. A few minutes later, a nurse came on the line. Ms. Rodriguez, your father is doing fine. He came in with some chest tightness, but all his tests came back normal. We're releasing him this afternoon. So it wasn't a heart attack? No, nothing like that. Probably just stress or anxiety. Very common. Nothing to worry about. I hung up the phone, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. Mom had made it sound like Dad was dying, like he was having serious heart problems brought on by my selfishness. In reality, he'd had some stress-related chest tightness and was going home the same day. They were literally using Dad's anxiety about not getting money to manipulate me into giving them money. That's when something inside me finally snapped. I picked up my phone and started typing. To everyone who has contacted me about my inheritance, Grandma Elena left me this money specifically because I was the only grandchild who never asked her for financial help. She left detailed instructions explaining this decision. I am honoring her wishes by keeping the money she wanted me to have. Anyone who has a problem with this can take it up with her attorney. I will not be discussing this further. I sent that message to Tyler, Chloe, Mom, Dad, Aunt Linda, and Cousin Marcus. Then I did something I'd never done before in my entire life. I turned off my phone and left it off. For the first time in 28 years, I was completely unreachable to my family. And you know what? It felt fucking amazing. I spent the weekend hiking, reading, cooking elaborate meals just for myself, and really thinking about my family dynamics for the first time, without the constant background noise of their demands and expectations. What I realized was terrifying and liberating at the same time. I'd been trained from childhood to believe that my value came from my ability to fix other people's problems. Every time there was family drama, I was expected to mediate. Every time someone needed money, I was expected to help. Every time someone was upset, I was expected to manage their emotions. But when had any of them ever been there for me? When I'd had my appendix out 2 years ago, who'd called to check on me? When I'd been stressed about my job situation, who'd offered support? When I'd gone through that terrible breakup with Derek, who'd listened to me cry? The answer was nobody. Because in my family, support only flowed one direction, toward everyone else. I thought about Grandma Elena's letter, about her observation that while they were learning to take, I was learning to give. She'd seen what I was just now beginning to understand, that I'd been raised to be the family fixer, the emotional caretaker, the one who sacrificed her own needs to keep everyone else happy. And you know what the truly fucked up part was? They resented me for it. They resented me for being independent, for not needing their help, for building a successful life on my own. My strength made them feel bad about their own choices, so they'd found ways to tear me down and make me feel guilty about my accomplishments. When I finally turned my phone back on Sunday night, I had 41 new messages. I deleted all of them without reading them. For the first time in my life, I was ready to stop playing their game. Monday morning, I woke up with a clarity I'd never experienced before. For the first time in my adult life, I had gone an entire weekend without managing someone else's crisis, and the world hadn't ended. I made coffee, checked my work emails, and actually felt excited about going to the office. It was amazing how much mental energy I had when I wasn't constantly processing my family's drama. But of course, they weren't done with me yet. Around 10 a.m., my boss Jennifer knocked on my office door. "Madison, there's someone here to see you." I looked up from my computer to see Tyler standing in the lobby of my office building, still in a suit like he'd driven straight from Dallas. My stomach dropped. What's he doing here? He says he's your brother and it's a family emergency. I walked out to the lobby, furious that he'd brought this drama to my workplace. "Tyler, what are you doing here?" "We need to talk," he said, and his voice had that fake calm tone that usually meant he was about to lose his shit. "Can we go somewhere private?" I glanced around at my coworkers, who were all pretending not to stare, and made a quick decision. "Fine. There's a coffee shop across the street." We walked to the Starbucks in silence, and I could feel Tyler's anger radiating off him like heat. The minute we sat down, he started in. "Do you have any idea what you've done to this family? I accepted an inheritance that was left to me. That's literally all I've done. Dad's been having panic attacks since you left. Mom's not sleeping. Chloe's been crying for a week straight. Tyler, Dad had some stress-related chest tightness and was released the same day. Stop being dramatic." His eyes narrowed. "How do you know that?" "Because I called the hospital to check on him. Unlike the rest of you who are apparently content to use his anxiety as emotional leverage." Tyler's face flushed red. "Emotional leverage? Are you kidding me right now? Our father was in the hospital. Our father had an anxiety attack because he didn't get money that was never his to begin with." Jesus Christ, Madison. Listen to yourself. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You've become this cold, selfish person who doesn't give a shit about anyone else. I stared at him across the small table. This man who'd never visited me in Denver, never called me unless he needed something, never shown interest in my life unless it somehow benefited him. "Tyler, when's the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? What does that have to do with anything? When's the last time you visited me, or invited me to visit you, or asked about my job or my friends or my life? Madison, the only time any of you contact me is when you need something, when you need me to mediate a fight, or loan someone money, or come home to manage a crisis. I'm not your sister. I'm your family employee. Tyler leaned back in his chair, clearly not expecting this response. That's not true, isn't it? When I had my appendix out, who called to check on me? We were all busy. When I got promoted to marketing manager, who congratulated me? Madison, come on. When Derek and I broke up after 3 years together, who was there for me? Tyler was quiet, because we both knew the answer was nobody. But the minute there's money involved, suddenly I'm family again. Suddenly my relationships matter. My choices matter. My decisions affect everyone. Look, Tyler said, shifting tactics. Maybe we haven't been as close as we should have been, but that doesn't change the fact that we're blood relatives, and blood relatives take care of each other. No, Tyler. Blood relatives respect each other. They support each other's successes instead of resenting them. They don't emotionally manipulate each other or try to guilt each other into making financial decisions. So that's it? You're just going to cut us all off? The question hung in the air between us. Was I going to cut them off? Is that what this was leading to? I'm going to honor Grandma Elena's wishes and use this money to build the life I want, I said finally. If you can't respect that decision, then maybe we don't have as much of a relationship as you think we do. Tyler stood up abruptly. Fine, but don't come crawling back to us when you realize how alone you are. Don't expect us to be there for you when your perfect little life falls apart. Tyler, I said quietly, I've been alone this whole time. I just didn't realize it until now. He stormed out of the coffee shop, leaving me sitting there with the weight of what I just said settling around me. But instead of feeling sad or guilty, I felt relieved. Like I'd finally told the truth about something I'd been hiding from myself for years. When I got back to the office, Jennifer called me into her office. Everything okay? She asked, closing the door behind us. Family stuff, I said with a shrug. It's complicated. Jennifer studied my face for a moment. Madison, can I tell you something? I've been managing people for 15 years, and I've seen a lot of employees struggle with work-life balance. But your family situation, it's different. What do you mean? Most people have trouble setting boundaries between work and family life. You have trouble setting boundaries between your life and everyone else's life. You take on responsibility for other people's emotions in a way that isn't healthy. I stared at her, surprised by how clearly she'd seen something I was just beginning to understand myself. I've watched you take calls from family members during work hours, seen you stressed about situations that had nothing to do with you, watched you cancel plans and rearrange your schedule constantly to manage other people's crises. I guess I never thought about it that way. Madison, you're an incredible employee and a genuinely good person, but you can't fix other people, and you shouldn't have to sacrifice your own well-being to try. That conversation stayed with me for the rest of the day. When I got home that evening, I sat on my couch and really looked at my apartment, my space, decorated how I liked it, quiet and peaceful and mine. For the first time, I let myself imagine what my life could look like if I wasn't constantly managing my family's drama. What if I didn't have to brace myself every time my phone rang? What if I could make plans without worrying about being called away for some crisis? What if I could just live my own life? That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I picked up my phone and started typing a message. Not a text this time, an email, something more formal, more final. To my family, after this week's events, I've realized that our relationships have become fundamentally unhealthy. I've spent my entire adult life managing other people's emotions, fixing other people's problems, and absorbing blame for situations I didn't create. This inheritance situation has shown me how conditional your love and respect have always been. When I was useful to you, I was family. When I had something you wanted, I was family. But when I made a decision that prioritized my own well-being over your desires, I became selfish and cruel. I'm done living my life according to other people's expectations. I'm done taking responsibility for other people's emotions. I'm done being the family scapegoat. Effective immediately, I'm taking a break from all family relationships. Don't call me, don't text me, don't show up at my workplace or my home. I need space to figure out who I am when I'm not constantly trying to keep everyone else happy. If and when I'm ready to have healthy relationships with any of you, I'll reach out. Until then, please respect my decision and leave me alone. Madison. I read it 3 times before hitting send. Then I sent it to all of them. Mom, Dad, Tyler, Chloe, even Aunt Linda and Cousin Marcus. Then I did something I'd never done before. I blocked all their numbers. Every single one. The immediate panic was overwhelming. What if there was a real emergency? What if someone actually needed me? What if I was making a terrible mistake? But then I remembered Grandma Elena's letter. You owe them nothing. You never did. And for the first time in my life, I believed it. The first week after blocking my family's numbers was honestly terrifying. I kept checking my phone obsessively, forgetting that I wouldn't get their calls or texts anymore. Every time it was quiet, I felt anxious, like I was missing something important. But you know what wasn't happening? I wasn't spending hours on the phone mediating fights. I wasn't losing sleep worrying about other people's problems. I wasn't canceling my own plans to manage someone else's crisis. For the first time in my adult life, my time was completely my own. Amy came over that Friday night with wine and takeout from my favorite Thai place. So, she said, settling onto my couch, how does it feel to be a free woman? Terrifying, I admitted, and amazing, and weird. I keep waiting for something bad to happen. Like what? I thought about it. I don't know. I guess I always believed that if I wasn't constantly available to fix everyone's problems, something terrible would happen, and it would be my fault. And has anything terrible happened? I considered this. Well, Tyler drove to Denver to yell at me in a coffee shop. But other than that, no. Everyone's still alive. The world hasn't ended, and somehow the Rodriguez family is managing to function without me. Amy raised her wine glass. Imagine that. Over the next few weeks, I started to understand what I'd been missing. Without the constant background stress of family drama, I had energy for things I'd forgotten I enjoyed. I started rock climbing again. I read 3 books in 2 weeks. I took a weekend trip to Aspen just because I felt like it. I also started making new friends. Real friends. Not people who only called when they needed something. I joined a hiking group and met Sarah, a teacher who'd moved to Denver from Ohio to get away from her own toxic family situation. We bonded immediately over our shared experience of being family scapegoats. The guilt is the worst part, Sarah told me over coffee after a particularly challenging hike. You know you're doing the right thing, but you've been conditioned to feel responsible for everyone else's happiness. Yes, I said, relieved to talk to someone who understood. I keep wondering if I'm being too harsh, if I should just forgive them and go back to how things were. And then I remember how they treated me over the inheritance, and I realized that how things were was already pretty fucked up. Sarah nodded. The inheritance just revealed what was already there. It didn't create the dysfunction. It exposed it. That conversation was a turning point for me. I started seeing the inheritance situation, not as the cause of my family's problems, but as a mirror that reflected their true priorities and values. About a month after I'd blocked their numbers, something interesting happened. I ran into my old college roommate Kate at the grocery store, and she mentioned that she'd heard about my family situation through mutual friends. I have to say, Kate said, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. I always thought your family treated you like their personal therapist. Really? It was that obvious? Madison, you used to get panic attacks before going home for holidays. You'd stress for weeks about managing everyone's emotions and keeping the peace. That's not normal family dynamics. I stood there in the frozen food aisle, realizing that other people had been seeing my family's dysfunction clearly, while I'd been too deep inside it to recognize how bad it was. Around that same time, I decided to do something I'd been thinking about for weeks. I made an appointment with a therapist. Dr. Rebecca Martinez specialized in family trauma and boundary issues, and our first session was eye-opening. Tell me about your role in your family, she said, after I'd explained the inheritance situation. I guess I was the mediator, the peacekeeper. How did you become the mediator? I thought about it. I don't know. It just sort of happened. Madison, 5-year-olds don't just naturally become family mediators. Someone taught you that your job was to manage other people's emotions. Over the next few sessions, Dr. Martinez helped me understand that I'd been trained from childhood to prioritize other people's needs over my own. Every time I'd successfully mediated a family fight or solved someone else's problem, I'd been rewarded with praise and attention. But every time I'd tried to assert my own needs or boundaries, I'd been guilt-tripped or blamed. Your family created a very clear dynamic, Dr. Martinez explained. Your value was conditional on your usefulness. When you were useful, you were loved and appreciated. When you weren't useful, you were criticized and blamed. So, the inheritance situation was the first time you'd ever prioritized your own needs over their wants. Of course, they reacted badly. You were breaking the fundamental rule of your family system, which was, Madison exists to serve others. That session left me feeling angry and sad. and validated all at the same time. Angry that I'd been manipulated for so long, sad about the childhood I'd lost to other people's expectations, and validated that my decision to cut contact had been necessary and right. 2 months after blocking their numbers, I finally felt ready to do something I'd been avoiding. I used some of Grandma Elena's money to book a trip to Europe. Solo. Something I'd always wanted to do but had never been able to afford. Standing in front of the Eiffel Tower at sunset, completely alone but not lonely, I thought about how different my life felt now, how quiet my mind was without the constant chatter of other people's problems, how much space I had for my own thoughts and dreams and desires. I pulled out my phone and took a selfie, then posted it on Instagram with the caption, "Living my best life in Paris, grateful for this incredible gift and the woman who believed I deserved it." I didn't tag any family members. I didn't mention the inheritance drama. I just shared my joy with the world. And you know what? The world shared it back. I got dozens of comments from friends and acquaintances celebrating my trip and my happiness. For the first time in my life, I was experiencing unconditional support. People who were happy for me just because I was happy, not because my happiness somehow benefited them. That night, sitting in a cafe in Montmartre, I wrote in my journal, "I think I finally understand what Grandma Elena meant when she said I owed them nothing. She wasn't just talking about money. She was talking about my life, my energy, my emotional well-being. I don't owe anyone access to those things. I get to choose who earns the privilege of being in my life." It was a simple revelation, but it changed everything. I'd been back from Europe for about 2 weeks when the unexpected happened. I was at work, reviewing marketing analytics for our Q3 campaign, when my assistant knocked on my door. "Madison, there's a woman here to see you. She says she's your cousin." My heart stopped. Cousin Marcus's wife, probably. Or maybe Aunt Linda had driven up from Austin. Either way, someone from my family had tracked me down again. But when I walked to the lobby, I saw someone I hadn't expected. My cousin Julia, from Mom's side of the family. Julia and I had been close as kids but had drifted apart as adults. She lived in Portland and worked as a nurse, and I hadn't seen her in probably 3 years. "Julia," I said, genuinely surprised. "What are you doing here?" "Hey, Madison." She looked nervous, fidgeting with her purse strap. "I know this is weird, but I was in town for a medical conference and I heard about what's been happening with your family." My defenses went up immediately. "What exactly did you hear? Can we talk somewhere private? I promise I'm not here to lecture you or try to guilt you into anything. I have some things I think you should know." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her for lunch. We went to a quiet restaurant near my office, and I braced myself for another family member trying to convince me I was wrong. But that's not what happened. "Madison," Julia said once we'd ordered, "I want you to know that I think you did the right thing." I nearly choked on my water. "What?" "The inheritance thing. Cutting contact with them. I think you made the right choice." I stared at her, speechless. "Look, I've been watching your family dynamics for years, and honestly, I've been worried about you. The way they treat you isn't normal or healthy. Julia, they're your family too." "Yeah, and I love them, but that doesn't mean I'm blind to their flaws." "Madison, do you know what they've been saying about you since you left?" My stomach clenched. "I don't want to know. I think you need to know." She pulled out her phone and showed me screenshots of Facebook posts I couldn't see because I'd blocked them all. Tyler had posted, "Sometimes you find out who people really are when money gets involved. Disappointed in people who put greed over family." Chloe had shared a meme about toxic family members who abandon you when they get successful, with the caption, "Some people forget where they came from." Mom had posted a long, rambling status about heartbreak when your own child chooses money over love, and how she was praying for forgiveness and healing. "There's more," Julia said gently. "They've been telling people that you inherited $500,000 and are refusing to help pay for medical bills and family emergencies." $500,000? It was $200,000, and there are no medical bills. "I know, but that's the story they're telling. They're painting themselves as victims, and you as this greedy, heartless person who abandoned her struggling family." I felt sick. Even after cutting contact, they were still trying to control the narrative, still trying to make me the villain. "But here's the thing," Julia continued. "Some of us aren't buying it." "What do you mean?" "Your cousin Maria called me last week. She said the whole story seemed off, because she knows you and knows you're not a greedy person. So she did some digging." Julia pulled out more screenshots. "Turns out Tyler's been posting about his new boat on Instagram, Chloe's been sharing pictures from expensive shopping trips. Your parents just put in a new pool. I stared at the images. Tyler grinning next to a brand new fishing boat that probably cost $40,000. Chloe modeling designer clothes in what looked like a high-end boutique. Mom and Dad standing next to construction equipment in their backyard. None of these people are struggling, Julia said quietly. They're not facing medical emergencies or financial hardship. They just wanted your money because they felt entitled to it. The full scope of their manipulation hit me like a freight train. They hadn't just guilted me about keeping the inheritance. They'd lied about their circumstances, invented emergencies, and spread false stories about me to mutual friends and extended family. There's one more thing, Julia said. Maria talked to your Aunt Linda, and Linda mentioned something interesting. Apparently, your dad told her that Elena's will was suspicious, and they were looking into contesting it. Contesting it? On what grounds? Undue influence. They want to claim that you manipulated your grandmother into leaving you the money. I felt like I was going to throw up. Even with me completely out of their lives, they were still trying to take away the one thing Grandma Elena had wanted me to have. Can they do that? I asked. Maria's husband is a lawyer, and he says it's unlikely to succeed. You'd have to prove you had unusual influence over Elena's decisions, and since you lived in Denver and barely saw her, that would be hard to establish. But they could make it expensive and time-consuming for you. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed by the realization that my family's toxicity ran even deeper than I'd understood. They weren't just hurt or disappointed. They were vindictive and calculating. Julia, why are you telling me this? She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Because I've watched them scapegoat you your entire life, and I should have said something sooner. Because what they're doing now is cruel and wrong, and because you deserve to know what you're dealing with. What do you mean, scapegoat me my entire life? Julia's expression grew sad. Madison, do you remember when we were kids and Tyler broke that window at Christmas? Who got blamed? I thought back. I did, because I was supposed to be watching him. You were 12. He was 15. Why was it your job to watch him? I'd never thought about it that way before. What about when Chloe got suspended from school for cheating? Who got lectured about being a better role model? I did. What about when your parents' marriage went through that rough patch when we were in high school? Who got told they needed to come home more often to help keep the family together? The pattern was becoming clear, and it was nauseating. They've been training you to take responsibility for other people's problems since you were a child, Julia said gently. And now that you've finally said no, they can't handle it. After lunch, I went back to work but couldn't concentrate. Everything Julia had told me was swirling around in my head, and I felt angry in a way I'd never experienced before. That evening, I called Dr. Martinez and scheduled an emergency session. I'm learning that the dysfunction in my family is even worse than I thought, I told her, and filled her in on everything Julia had shared. How does that make you feel? Dr. Martinez asked. Angry, betrayed, but also validated, like maybe I wasn't overreacting when I cut contact. Madison, what would you say to a friend who told you this story? If someone you cared about described this kind of treatment from their family, what advice would you give them? I thought about it. I'd tell them to run and never look back. And yet you're questioning whether you made the right choice. I guess part of me still hopes they'll change, that they'll realize what they've done and apologize and we can have a healthy relationship. Dr. Martinez nodded. That hope is normal and understandable. But Madison, they're actively working to contest your inheritance and spreading lies about you to your extended family. Does that sound like people who are interested in changing or making amends? It didn't. It sounded like people who were so invested in their victim narrative that they'd rather destroy me than admit they were wrong. That night, I made a decision that felt both scary and empowering. I was done hoping they'd change. I was done leaving the door open for reconciliation that would never come. I was ready to build a life that had nothing to do with them at all. 6 months after cutting contact with my family, I barely recognized my own life, and I mean that in the best possible way. I'd used part of Grandma Elena's money to move to a better apartment. Nothing crazy, but a place with a view of the mountains that made me happy every morning when I opened my curtains. I'd also invested in myself in ways I'd never been able to afford before. I took a photography class, joined a rock climbing gym, and started seeing Dr. Martinez twice a week instead of once. The therapy was revealing things about my childhood that I'd never processed before, like how I'd been conditioned to believe that my worth was tied to my usefulness to others, how I'd learned to suppress my own needs and desires, because expressing them was met with guilt trips and emotional manipulation. You're essentially learning how to be yourself for the first time, Dr. Martinez told me during one session. Most people figure out their own identity during adolescence, but you were too busy managing everyone else's emotions. She was right. At 28, I was finally discovering what I actually liked, what I wanted, what made me happy when I wasn't constantly worried about everyone else's feelings. Turns out, I loved hiking at sunrise. I loved trying new restaurants by myself. I loved having a completely clean apartment that stayed that way, because no one else was making messes. I loved making plans and not having to cancel them for someone else's crisis. I also loved the friends I was making, real friends who wanted to spend time with me because they enjoyed my company, not because they needed something from me. Sarah, from my hiking group, had become especially close. She understood the family scapegoat experience in a way that bonded us immediately. We'd spend hours talking about our childhoods, our families, and our journeys toward independence. The hardest part, Sarah told me over coffee one Saturday morning, is realizing that some people might never understand your decision. Society tells us that family is everything, that blood is thicker than water, that you should forgive and forget. But what if the family is toxic? I asked. Then society is wrong, she said simply. You don't owe anyone access to your life just because you share DNA. That conversation stayed with me, especially when I got an unexpected call from Julia a few weeks later. Madison, I wanted to give you a heads up, she said. Your parents are telling people that you've had some kind of mental breakdown. They're saying the inheritance money has changed you and you're not thinking clearly. I sighed. Of course they were. What specifically are they saying? That you've become paranoid and cut off your loving family for no reason. Your mom is telling people she's worried about your mental health and considering an intervention. An intervention for what? Being happy? I know it's ridiculous, but I thought you should know what they're putting out there. After that call, I realized they were never going to stop. Even with me completely out of their lives, they were still trying to control the narrative, still trying to paint me as the problem. That's when I decided to do something I'd been considering for months. I wrote about my experience. I started with a blog post titled, "When Family Love Comes with Conditions." I wrote about growing up as the family scapegoat, about the inheritance situation, about the decision to cut contact. I was honest about the guilt and the grief, but also about the freedom and the peace I'd found. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of comments from people sharing their own stories of toxic family dynamics, thanking me for putting words to experiences they'd never been able to articulate. I thought I was the only one, wrote one commenter. My family does the exact same thing. I'm blamed for everything that goes wrong, but I'm expected to fix everything that goes wrong. Thank you for writing this, said another. I've been struggling with the decision to cut contact with my own family, and your story gives me hope that it's possible to be happy on the other side. Reading those comments, I realized that my experience wasn't unique. There were thousands of people out there struggling with similar family dynamics, feeling guilty for setting boundaries, wondering if they were wrong to prioritize their own well-being. I started writing more, about toxic family dynamics, about setting boundaries, about the grief that comes with realizing your family isn't who you thought they were. Each post generated more responses from people who felt seen and understood. 6 months later, I'd built a substantial following and was getting emails from literary agents interested in turning my blog into a book. One evening, I was working on a post about financial boundaries when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but it had an Austin area code. Against my better judgment, I answered. Madison, this is your cousin Marcus. My blood ran cold. Marcus was the 4th grandchild, the one who was supposed to inherit equally from Grandma Elena's house. Marcus, I asked everyone not to contact me. I know, and I'm sorry to violate that boundary, but I have something I think you need to know. I almost hung up, but something in his voice made me pause. What is it? I just met with Elena's lawyer about the house situation. Madison, there are some things about the will that nobody told you. What do you mean? Can we meet? I promise this isn't about trying to get you to reconcile with anyone. This is about information you deserve to have. I was suspicious, but curious. What kind of information? Information about why Elena really left you that money, and about what your parents have been doing since you cut contact. 2 days later, I met Marcus at a coffee shop in downtown Austin. I'd flown back to Texas for the first time since the inheritance disaster, and being in the city felt strange and uncomfortable. Marcus looked older than I remembered, more serious. He'd always been the quiet cousin, the one who stayed out of family drama. Thank you for coming, he said as we sat down. I know this is hard for you. Just tell me what you wanted to tell me. He pulled out a folder and set it on the table between us. Elena's lawyer gave me copies of some documents that were in her safe deposit box. Madison, she didn't just leave you money, she left you letters. Lots of them. What kind of letters? Documentation? Evidence? Elena had been keeping records of your family's behavior for years. He opened the folder and showed me photocopied pages covered in Grandma Elena's handwriting. Dates, names, detailed descriptions of conversations and incidents. She documented every time they asked her for money, every time they complained about you being successful, every time they blamed you for something that wasn't your fault. I read through the pages, my hands shaking. Grandma Elena had been taking notes like she was building a case, and in a way, she was. December 15th, 2019. Roberto called asking for $3,000 to cover Christmas expenses. Said Madison should be helping more since she makes good money. March 8, 2020. Chloe complained that Madison doesn't understand struggle. Said Madison got lucky with her job and doesn't deserve success. June 22, 2020. Tyler asked for down payment help for his house. Said Madison is selfish for not offering to help family with her tech money. Page after page of documented resentment, entitlement, and scapegoating. There's more, Marcus said gently. Elena also documented the positive interactions she had with you. Every time you called just to check on her, every time you visited without needing anything, every thoughtful gift you sent. The contrast was stark. My pages were filled with examples of genuine care and affection. Their pages were filled with financial requests and complaints about my success. Marcus, why are you showing me this? Because Elena wanted you to have it. She left instructions that if anyone ever tried to contest the will or claim you manipulated her, these documents should be given to you as evidence. Are they contesting it? Marcus nodded grimly. They filed paperwork last month. They're claiming undue influence, and that Elena wasn't mentally competent when she wrote the will. I felt sick. Can they win? Not with this evidence. Elena was clearly mentally sharp and had very specific, documented reasons for her decisions. But Madison, there's something else. He reached into the folder and pulled out one more letter. This one sealed and addressed to me in Grandma Elena's handwriting. She left this for you to read if they ever tried to challenge her will. With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and read, My dearest Madison, if you're reading this, then my worst fears about this family have come true. They've tried to take away the gift I left you, and they've probably made you feel guilty for accepting it. I want you to know that every decision I made about my will was careful and deliberate. I watched this family for decades, and I saw how they treated you. I saw how they blamed you for their problems and took credit for your successes. I saw how they trained you to believe that your value came from your usefulness to them. The money I left you isn't just an inheritance. It's reparations. It's compensation for all the emotional labor you provided, all the crises you managed, all the guilt you absorbed that belonged to other people. You don't owe them explanations, apologies, or money. You don't owe them access to your life or your emotional energy. You owe them nothing, and you never did. Build the life you want, far away from people who only valued you for what you could do for them. Be happy, be free, and know that someone saw your worth when others couldn't. All my love, Grandma Elena P.S. The lawyer has instructions to use whatever legal means necessary to protect your inheritance. Don't let them bully you into giving up what is rightfully yours. I read the letter 3 times before I could speak. She knew, I whispered. She knew exactly what they were like. She did, Marcus said. And she wanted to make sure you knew that leaving you the money wasn't favoritism. It was justice. Reading Grandma Elena's final letter in that Austin coffee shop was like receiving permission I didn't know I needed. Permission to stop feeling guilty, stop second-guessing myself, stop hoping for reconciliation with people who had shown me exactly who they were. Marcus, I said, carefully folding the letter. Why are you helping me? You could have just let them contest the will without warning me. He was quiet for a moment, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. Because I've been watching this family dynamic my whole life too, and it's not okay. You didn't deserve to be treated like the family's emotional dumping ground, but they're your family too. Yeah, and I love them, but love doesn't mean enabling bad behavior. What they're doing to you is wrong, and what they're trying to do now is wrong. Marcus helped me connect with Elena's lawyer, who assured me that the will contest had no merit and would likely be dismissed within a few months. The documentation Elena had left made it impossible to claim undue influence or mental incompetence. Your grandmother was remarkably thorough, the lawyer told me. I've been practicing estate law for 30 years, and I've never seen someone document their reasoning so meticulously. When I flew back to Denver the next day, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: complete peace about my decision. Any lingering guilt or uncertainty had been erased by Elena's words, and her careful documentation of the family patterns I'd lived with my entire life. That evening, I sat down and wrote what I knew would be my final blog post about the family situation. Today, I learned that my grandmother had been documenting my family's dysfunction for years. She saw what I couldn't see when I was living in it, that I was being used as an emotional scapegoat and financial resource while being blamed for problems I didn't create. Her final letter to me contained the words I needed to hear: "You owe them nothing, and you never did." For anyone reading this who's struggling with similar family dynamics, I want you to know that it's okay to choose your own well-being. It's okay to set boundaries that other people don't like. It's okay to build a life that prioritizes your happiness over other people's comfort. Family isn't just about blood. It's about love, respect, and mutual support. If those elements aren't present, then what you have isn't really family. It's just people who share your DNA and expect unlimited access to your emotional and financial resources. You deserve better. You deserve relationships where your worth isn't conditional on your usefulness. You deserve to be valued for who you are, not what you can do for others. I'm happy to report that 1 year after cutting contact with my toxic family members, I'm living my best life. I have genuine friendships, I'm pursuing my dreams, and I wake up every day grateful for the peace and freedom I fought so hard to achieve. To anyone still on the fence about setting boundaries with toxic family members, you're stronger than you think, and you deserve better than you're getting. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. The post went viral. Within a week, it had been shared thousands of times, and I was getting interview requests from podcasts and magazines. My story had struck a nerve with people all over the world who were dealing with similar family dynamics. 6 months later, I published a book about family scapegoating and toxic dynamics. It became a bestseller and led to speaking engagements at conferences and universities. I'd accidentally built a career out of helping people recognize and escape unhealthy family patterns. But more importantly, I'd built a life I actually wanted to live. 2 years after cutting contact with my family, I was invited to speak at a conference in Austin about setting healthy boundaries. It felt surreal to be back in my hometown as a successful author and speaker, talking about the very experiences that had once made me feel so powerless. After my talk, a young woman approached me. She looked like she'd been crying. "I just wanted to thank you," she said. "Your book helped me realize that my family's treatment of me isn't normal. I've been the family scapegoat my whole life, and I thought it was my fault." "It's not your fault," I told her, "and you have more power than you realize." "I'm scared to set boundaries. What if they cut me off?" I smiled, thinking about how different my life had become since I'd stopped being afraid of that exact thing. Then you'll discover what I discovered, that being cut off from people who don't truly value you is actually a gift. It creates space for people who will love and appreciate you for who you are. On the plane back to Denver, I pulled out my phone and looked at photos from my recent trip to Italy with Sarah and 2 other friends I'd met through my hiking group. We were all laughing, wine glasses raised, the sunset over Tuscany painting everything golden. These women had never asked me for money. They'd never expected me to manage their emotions or solve their problems. They celebrated my successes without resentment, and supported me through challenges without making them about themselves. This was what healthy relationships looked like. I thought about the family I'd been born into, and the family I'd chosen for myself. The contrast was striking and clarifying. As the plane descended into Denver, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude for Grandma Elena's wisdom and foresight, for my own strength in choosing a difficult but necessary path, and for the beautiful life I'd built from the ashes of toxic family dynamics. I was 30 years old, financially secure, emotionally healthy, and surrounded by people who genuinely cared about my well-being. I had work that mattered to me and brought meaning to other people's lives. I had freedom, peace, and authentic relationships. I had everything I'd always wanted and didn't even know I was allowed to want. The last text I'd ever received from my family was from Tyler, about 6 months after I'd cut contact. "Hope you're happy with your choice." I'd looked at that message for a long time before deleting it. At the time, it had felt like a threat, like he was implying I'd regret my decision and end up miserable and alone. Now, 2 years later, I could honestly say, yes, Tyler, I am happy with my choice, happier than I've ever been in my entire life, because sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is being forced to choose between your peace and other people's comfort. Sometimes you have to lose toxic relationships to make room for healthy ones. Sometimes you have to disappoint people who never truly supported you in order to find people who will. My grandmother saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself: strength, independence, and worth that existed independent of my usefulness to others. Her final gift wasn't just money. It was permission to value myself the way she valued me. If you're watching this and you're the family scapegoat, the one who always gets blamed, the one who's expected to fix everyone else's problems while your own needs get ignored, I want you to know that you have options. You have power. You deserve better. You don't owe anyone access to your life just because they're related to you. You don't owe anyone forgiveness that they haven't earned. You don't owe anyone a relationship that damages your mental health and happiness. What you owe yourself is the chance to discover who you are when you're not constantly managing other people's emotions. You owe yourself the opportunity to build relationships based on mutual respect and genuine affection. You owe yourself the freedom to pursue your own dreams without guilt or interference. It won't be easy. There will be guilt, grief, and people who don't understand your choices. But on the other side of that difficulty is a life of authenticity and peace that's worth every uncomfortable moment. 2 years ago, I thought I was losing my family. What I was actually doing was finding myself, and that has made all the difference. Have you ever had to choose between toxic family relationships and your own well-being? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's struggling with the same decision. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about overcoming toxic relationships and building the life you deserve. Remember, you're stronger than you think, and you deserve people in your life who see your worth. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the family you choose is better than the family you're born into.